And next up, unseen footage from the XYZ Affair. Enjoy.
American neutrality. The French helped us during our revolution. However, it would be too dangerous to help them with their battle against Britain at this time. There's too much to risk. We're a newborn nation. I wish the French would accept their neutrality rather than attacking our ships. I must send some intelligent American diplomats. Yes. They shall negotiate with the French Foreign Minister, Charles Maurice de Talleyrand-Périgord. But whom shall I send? Excuse me, Mr. Pickney, can I help you?
Actually, yes, sir. You see, John Marshall, Elbridge, Jerry, and I, were thinking about it. And we may or may not have been listening to you, and we would like to go to France to negotiate the matter.
Yes. I mean, Mr. Adams, think about it. We're all intelligent and American and diplomats. Mr. Adams, we are perfectly qualified for this opportunity.
This is all very true. You make a good point. Now quickly, pack your bags and sail to France as soon as possible. I will notify the French Foreign Minister of your voyage at once. Bonjour, monsieur. So we're here today to speak about the French attacks on the American ships. Mr. Talleyrand de Périgord would have come here to meet you guys today, but unfortunately he's not available, so I will be representing him.
It's nice to meet you.
No, the pleasure is ours. Now, how badly do you Americans want your ships?
We really would appreciate it if the French stopped attacking American ships. You see, we must remain neutral for various reasons, but we still want to maintain good relations with France.
Then I guess you wouldn't mind paying a slight fee.
Are you trying to make us bribe you?
I wouldn't call it a bribe. I would call it more like some fee for your happiness.
How shameful you French are!
Millions for defense, not one for tribute!
Okay. Hello, and we're back on Food for Factions and Rascally Reactions. With an election coming up next year, we've decided to bring in the candidates from the last presidential election. Please welcome the 1800 election candidates, Aaron Burr, John Adams, and our winner, Thomas Jefferson.
Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be on your show.
Such a pleasure to have you. So once again, our questions will be coming from you, the audience. Our first question comes from Miss Virginia from, surprisingly, Virginia. So, we had a tie between Mr. Burr and Mr. Jefferson. Mr. Jefferson, how did that make you feel?
Well, I was a little worried about who would be chosen to be the president. I wouldn't have been just happy with the vice president. But, of course, that's all right now that we've established our roles. I'm simply thrilled to be the leader of this great nation.
And how did you feel, Mr. Burr?
Well, I mean, I obviously wasn't happy about Hamilton's decision, but at least another Democratic Republican was chosen to be president.
That's very true.
Actually, that's a bad thing. The Democratic Republicans are really disorganized. They shouldn't be holding any power here in the United States.
And why is that?
Simply the fact that Mr. Jefferson and Mr. Burr tied shows this. We Federalists are smart enough to have a system put together. We knew that if our party were to win, that we would want to vote me as president and Charles Pickney as vice president.
Oh, we have a related question from Mr. Charles Outlandmarsh from Massachusetts. What did you do to ensure that Pinckney would be vice president and not the president?
Basically, an elector from Rhode Island gave one vote to John Jay, so I beat Pinckney by only one vote.
I see, that's very smart of you. So, Mr. Jefferson, a question from Mary Halverson from Connecticut. How was it decided who would be president and who would be vice president with the tie?
Well, Alexander Hamilton decided.
He's a Federalist, right?
Yes.
John Charles from South Carolina wants to know, how do you think it felt for him to choose between two Democratic Republicans as president?
Well, we have had our differences, but the man is good in his heart. I think that he made the right decision. Not that you aren't a good candidate, Mr. Burr. But I'm happy with his choice, and I know that he will be too.
Sorry to jump in here, but Alexander Hamilton is a terrible person. He made a bad mistake and was very rude. His information about others is inaccurate, and quite frankly, he's a liar.
In what way is he a liar?
Oh, here,
You can go.
Okay, we'll crop that and go into. He has said some very rude things about me, and I believe that I, as well as others, find him to be untrue.
And what did he say?
I'd rather not say.
I understand. Our next question comes from Rhode Island, from Mr. William Williams. Mr. Jefferson, there has been some turmoil among the Democratic Republicans over the Louisiana Purchase. Who wants to have you explain that, please?
I don't believe so.
I see.
I must say, I am very upset with this movement, as are the other Federalists, many of the population. Don't be ignorant about what this country wants, Mr. Jefferson.
What are you upset about?
The land acquired is too much, and a country needs to stick together if it wants to stay united.
Okay. So, here's a question coming straight from Maryland, from Mr. Joshua Statesinger. He wants to know why you, Mr. Jefferson, told your Secretary of State to ignore the commission sent by Mr. Adams a few years ago.
Well, if Mr. Madison, my Secretary of State, were to give out the commissions, then the majority of the justice system in this country would be Federalists. However, the people spoke in the election of 1800 when they voted for a Democratic-Republican government.
But who won the popular vote?
On this note, we're going to take a break, but when we come back, we'll have Mr. Marbury and Mr. Marshall to discuss the matter of Marbury versus Madison. Thank you so much for having us. Welcome back on Food for Factions and Rascally Reactions. Right now, we'll be interviewing Thomas Jefferson, William Marbury, and John Marshall of the famous case Marbury versus Madison to find out the inside details. And in this segment, our questions will be coming from you, America, so send them through Twitter. Hello, Mr. Jefferson. How are you?
Good. How are you, Miss Van Dyke?
I'm great, thank you. So our first question is from @JohnAdams from New Jersey. Well, Mr. Jefferson, could you tell me why you decided to stop Mr. Madison from delivering the commissions?
Well, as you might already have heard, John Adams was the president before me, and we were both part of two different political parties. President Adams was a Federalist, and I was a Democratic Republican. During Mr. Adams' last day as president, he nominated as many judgeships as he could for Federalists, but he didn't finish by the time that I became president. So I didn't want to have a whole bunch of Federalists as judges, so I decided to ignore the commissions.
I see. So our next question is from @Marianne Sawyer from Virginia. So is that the reason why Mr. William Marbury was upset with you?
That is exactly why Mr. Marbury wanted to have the job of being a judge, but he was just another Federalist, and I needed people from my own party.
Okay. We stay seated, Mr. Jefferson, and we're going to bring out William Marbury. Oh, hello, Mr. Marbury. Thanks for coming.
You're welcome.
So our first question is from @Simran Kaur from New Jersey. So could you tell us a bit about your lawsuit against Madison?
Sure. So I had wanted and deserved the job of being a midnight judge. Given that John Adams had signed my commission, I expected it to be delivered so I could assume my rightful role as a midnight judge. So when Jefferson ordered Madison to disregard the commission after the change in presidencies, I became upset with Madison because he listened to Jefferson's outrageous demands. I thought we were on the same page here, but I guess not anymore.
I see. So our next question is from @CrazyCats from Maryland. So do you regret the idea of suing Mr. Madison?
Honestly, I do not. But you see, we're in the Supreme Court, and I was that even if Madison did deliver my commission letter, Jefferson might have told him to disregard it, and we would have been right where we started.
I see. So our next question, James Carfield from New York wants to know, can you tell us a little bit more about what a writ of mandamus is, and is that what you wanted? Is that what you were petitioning for the court, for?
Well, you see, I believe and continue to believe that as the current Secretary of State, Madison was obligated to deliver the commissions despite what Mr. Jefferson ordered. And I felt if the Supreme Court appointed a writ of mandamus, it would have pushed Madison to do what was right, and the Supreme Court would not pursue this.
I see. So can you tell me a little bit more how the court responded to this?
Well, the Chief Justice, John Marshall, agreed with me that delivering the commission was the right thing to be done, but he concluded it was unconstitutional for the Supreme Court to deliver a writ of mandamus. You see, the Judiciary Act of 1789 gave the Supreme Court original jurisdiction to order these, but the judges were conflicted due to the fact that the Judiciary Act were inconsistent with the Constitution. In the end, the court decided that a writ of mandamus could not be ordered while still following the Constitution, because Marbury would have to go through appellation court system before arguing in front of the Supreme Court.
I see, okay. So, Marbury fan wants to know, how do you feel about John Marshall since he's the man who started this situation?
So, John Marshall and I were good friends before the case between Madison and I. I'm not sure we can be friends anymore because of what he did. He could have solved the big problem by just issuing a writ of mandamus, but instead he decided not to. He denied it.
That's really a shame. I'm sorry, Mr. Marbury. Thank you so much for being on our show, though, and sharing your views with the world. Right now, we're going to call out Mr. John Marshall himself to see where he stands in this case.
Hi, Mr. Marshall.
Hi, Ms. Van Dyke. How are you?
I'm great, thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
So, can you tell us your part on this case?
It would be my pleasure, Ms. Van Dyke. I was the Chief Justice of the case and the man in charge of determining if William Marbury would receive a commission to be a Justice of Peace.
Okay, so our first question for you comes from Thomas Morley from Connecticut. He wants to know, what was your final decision? How did you determine whether Mr. Marbury should receive his commission?
In determining whether Madison should hand Marbury his commissions, I asked myself 3 questions. Did Marbury have the right to the writ which he petitioned? Did the laws of the United States allow the courts to grant Marbury this writ? And lastly, if they did, could the Supreme Court issue this writ?
I see. So George Marley wants to know, I think they might be related. What was your final decision for Mr. William Marbury?
When it came to the 3rd question, I thought about it for a while, and it ended up confirming judicial review, which is the ability of the Supreme Court to restrict congressional power by declaring an act unconstitutional. I declared the court could not grant this writ of mandamus to Marbury because in Section 13 of the Judiciary Act of 1789, which granted the right for the writ to be granted, it was unconstitutional because it continued to cases of original jurisdiction.
Can you please explain to the audience what original jurisdiction is?
Original jurisdiction is the power to bring a case directly to the Supreme Court. If I had extended the court's original jurisdiction for this case, it would have surpassed the authority of Congress. Therefore, Marbury did not receive his commission, which contended President Jefferson.
Okay, so Catherine Wilcox wants to know, Jefferson won the war but lost the battle. Can you explain?
Well, in this case, it's really an analogy. In this case, the battle was Marbury versus Madison, and whether the judge would end up being a Federalist or a Democratic Republican. And obviously, Jefferson wanted to be a Democratic Republican judge, and he ended up getting this. But the war overall was which political party would have more power over political issues and really in the government system, which ended up being the Federalists.
See, thank you so much for being on my show. Great meeting you.
You too.
And that concludes our show for today. Come back on Food for Factions and Rascally Reactions next week. Thank you.